The literary technique of parallel plot. So remember that plot itself is the story, how the conflicts build up, the rising action to the climax, and falling action, and ultimately the resolution. So a parallel plot, remember what parallel lines are from math, is when a writer weaves two or more dramatic plots together and they follow a similar path or similar course. And these two plots are usually linked by a common character and a similar theme. So Steinbeck definitely has a parallel plot going with the experiences of George and Lenny. So see if you can follow along here. George, number one, gets a new job at the ranch, and his dream is this ranch of his own. Lenny gets this new job at the ranch, but his dream is to have rabbits on the ranch of their own. In number two, then later in the story, George is complaining to Carson about having to take care of Lenny, and Lenny is worried about losing George when he's talking to Crooks. Number three, for each of them, following their plot lines, George is becoming wary of Curly and his wife, whereas Lenny is quite naive about Curly and his wife. Number four, the next bullet down, George is trying to connect with the other ranch hands. Meanwhile, Lenny is trying to just connect with soft things to pet. Number five, George is challenged by Curly, and five for Lenny is that he hurts Curly for George. Six for both of them is that they each share their dream of owning a ranch and having the rabbits with other characters. George and Lenny then for seven, George goes off to town with the guys to have fun. Meanwhile, Lenny stays back on his own enjoying the puppy, but he accidentally kills it. Number eight for George, he discovers what Lenny did at that point, and in the meantime, the plot moves on and Lenny kills Curly's wife. After that, George is searching for Lenny, and Lenny is going to hide and wait for George at the river. And finally, in number 10, George finds Lenny and retells their ranch dream, but kills him, whereas Lenny gets George to tell him of the ranch dream and then is killed. And so you can see how the plot for each of these characters is similar, and also both of their dreams are lost in the end. There's sort of a parallel plot with George and Candy, whereas George takes care of Lenny, and Candy, this is called a subplot, a smaller plot, takes care of his dog. And number two for George and Candy too, Lenny does things that are not acceptable in society, like killing mice and puppies and people. And Candy, his dog's smell is not acceptable by the other men. So see how these are somewhat similar. And in the end, George feels forced to kill Lenny, and Candy also feels forced to kill his dog. And the dog, if you were paying attention, was a little bit of foreshadowing of what was ultimately going to happen to Lenny. So the literary technique of parallel plot is sometimes used by authors, and important to note.